Nope, that is the only use case of ICOSA. It is purely a staking token, very similar to like HEX is purely a staking token, and the mechanisms behind how it inflates and the yield payout for the staking is where the value proposition of ICOSA comes from. One cool thing is if you look into the contract, deeply, like the mechanics of each of the token, what you'll find is negative externalities or things that are bad for the ICOSA price translate into positive price mechanisms for either HEX, Hedron, or both. So that's a cool feature. Like if you start digging into the mechanics of this system more, you'll find that the things that bring the ICOSA price down may start to trend HEX and Hedron up.
Okay. Interesting.
Yep. Simply put.
And we talked about earlier too, could you, and I know you've explained this a couple of times, but in the simplest way possible, can you, without a diagram, I know maybe there'll be a diagram eventually, but without a diagram, can you explain the positive feedback loop with HEX, Hedron, and ICOSA?
Yes. Okay. So let's see. Let me think of where the best place to start is. Let's start with the ICOSA one. I think that's the best place to start. And so first you have to understand the HSI buybacks. And that is that at any point in time, you can take an HSI, tokenize it, and sell it to the contract. And so what's really cool is that there is a potential arbitration point there where that if the price of ICOSA is higher than the price that it would take for you to buy HEX, stake it, and then tokenize it, and then send it to the contract and get ICOSA. If you can sell it for more than the money you put into the HEX that you bought to make the stake, then you can sell that ICOSA for an immediate profit. Now that does something really interesting. What it does is that it brings the ICOSA price down, but it also pumps the HEX price a little bit because HEX is being bought off the market to take advantage of that arbitration, and it's being locked up for 5555, presumably because that's how you get the most ICOSA. So now there's less sell pressure in HEX going in the future. Now, while the two prices meet together in an equilibrium, the HEX price has bumped up a little bit. So where that arbitration point was before it went above it, when it meets that arb point again, it's now a little higher than it was before. So the base ICOSA price has gone up a little bit. Now, that's the first positive. That's the first thing to maybe trigger the positive feedback loop, because then what happens after that is that HSI that was sold to the contract to take advantage of this arb point, the contract takes an advance on it and allows it to be liquidated. So then 90 days later, somebody will bid on that HSI with Hedron, and that will be burned. Now, the amount of Hedron that is used to liquidate that HSI will always be higher than the amount it took to take the advance on. We can discuss that later, but mathematically, the incentives work out that way. So what that means is, as people take advantage of the ICOSA arb, Hedron downstream gets burned. Now, while burning doesn't necessarily pump the price, it does divert buy pressure and prevent sell pressure kind of in the future. And so what that can do is give room for the Hedron price to start going up. Now, if the Hedron price starts going up, there's another arbitration point within the Hedron system. So if say you put $1,000 into a HEX stake, and then you make an HSI, but you could take $1,100 out when you advance on the Hedron in that HSI. Well, there's another immediate amount of profit that you can take. So you buy HEX, you stake it, you immediately take your Hedron advance, and then you take that, and then now you've profited $100. And so what happens then is the Hedron price goes down, but again, the HEX price goes up. So if the HEX price goes up, that kind of brings that arb for ICOSA up a little bit in the background, but the HEX is going up because it's being locked 5555, because that's the most capital efficient way to take advantage of the system. But then in the short term, Hedron gets sold down, but because people have immediately profited, that HSI, or at least a large percentage of the HSIs that are used to take advantage of the Hedron arbitration point, will probably also be sent to the liquidation market. And as I just said before, more Hedron is always burnt than the amount of Hedron you get from the advance. So then 90 days later, from a net perspective, more Hedron is getting burnt, which, as we just said, helps push the price up. Our point, repeat that entire cycle all over again.